Good morning, Apex University. My name is Dan and I'll be your coach for today. And today we're doing one of my personal favorite things, which is we're doing a follow-up VOD review from somebody that we've looked at before. We're looking at Cute Fluffy Cats, whose gameplay we also looked at in episode number 4. We talked a bit about tempered aggression, the skill of understanding how dangerous areas work, how your teammates' line of sight work, and how you use flanking positions to be aggressive without being suicidal. How to assess information very quickly and decide when to go in. And in this VOD, I would like to look at how you've improved that and what you could work on next. So let's have a look. You have a disconnected teammate, which means it's only the two of you, and you decide to hot drop. Instantly, when you hot drop here and you also have some very difficult loot to work with, no armor, no weapon or no ammo, there's a couple things you can do. You can try to find isolated opponents that after you kill them you would be able to finish in order to take their loot. You might still have trouble if you're missing ammo or heals, but it could help you get some armor or some other stuff like weapons along the way. If you can't do that, you might want to play close to your teammate. If you don't have the loot you need, you can still overcompensate, especially if you're playing lifeline by playing next to your teammate. Any damage that you can't absorb due to your lack of armor, maybe your teammate can. Any damage that they can't do, maybe you can, and vice versa. Other than that, if you land on a hot drop, there's a lot of enemies around and you don't think you can win the fight, I would suggest just leaving. You know the map well enough at this point that you know where in the nearby area you can get the essentials you need, and then by the time you turn around and come back, you can still finish the fight as you would have otherwise. This is a battle royale, RNG is not always going to be in your way, so don't be afraid if you have a bad start to just play it safe. Now luckily the first enemy that you run into has a purple armor and isn't particularly good, which massively helps your loot situation. But let's talk a little bit about how you approach the fight with the Pathfinder here and look at what I would improve. When you approach the fight with the Pathfinder, you are very nicely pre-aiming where you expect somebody might be. When you're inside a building, your crosshair placement is good, but you do so only when you have no indication of where the enemies might be. And as soon as you see a purple box that indicates that an enemy is probably in or near that last area, that's when you stop doing the pre-aiming and what proper crosshair placement, where really your aim should have been hugging to the wall. You also decide to stay in ADS, and since it doesn't decrease the spread on shotguns in this game, I mean you are zooming in and decreasing your field of view, which makes it slightly easier to aim, but because you're zooming in on a Pathfinder at such close range, you're very liable to lose track of them or over or under aim your shot. So I would really like to see you hip fire there and properly hold your crosshair onto the inside of the wall that you decide to peek, as you were doing before. Moving on. There was still an enemy on the right that you saw shooting through the window, but he never ended up attacking you, so it's not too bad. Just wanted to point out that it might be important, and after you end up looting and go towards runoff to loot again, I want to talk about where you decide to drop your package right here. Now there are many ways that you can decide to deploy your supply drop, and it kind of depends on what point of the game you're in. But if you're in a location that you intend to loot where you don't see or hear any enemies, I always make sure not to drop the package too early, as it might attract enemies while I'm still looting that were making their way in, or tell somebody on my next rotation where I'm coming from, as well as not giving me the time to possibly set up a bait for anybody that might show up. Instead, what I like to do is loot up a little bit first and then drop the package somewhere on high ground or behind cover so that people that do show up can't instantly see where I took it, and I can possibly catch them while they're looking around trying to look for us, as I'm anticipating people to show up. You drop it out in the open, somewhere where there's not only not a lot of cover, but it is in the low ground and there are a lot of sidelines on it, making it quite possible that if people show up, it's not a good engage for you. So as you decide to drop it here and continue looting, I want you to remember there's a giant blue beam behind you in the sky telling people where you are, and right here before you go back and open the package, I would really prefer that you go to a better vantage point somewhere on high ground, check the surrounding area for teams that might be approaching. Because there's only two of you, you and your teammate, you can overcome the man disadvantage that you might be about to be in if you have an information advantage and a positional advantage because you are prepared for their attack. Now you do indeed end up getting attacked here, and I quite like your decision to instantly heal and get inside and just try to gather the information that you can. As you see yourself poking through the door here and through the window, it's good cover usage and it's good scouting. My problem with it, however, is that you decide to pick the side of the door that the doors are blown out, meaning your potential cover there is gone, when you have a better doorway on the other side that you could swing out into the open, which would also give you a better defendable position if you get pushed here from above, inside or below inside. But more importantly, once you notice where one of the enemies is, you also have a fairly decent idea of where the other one is, because you heard him shoot towards your teammate, and wherever he is, he's farther up to the right side of your screen. And so when you decide to take a wide peek here and peek the left and decide to shoot at the left person, you now know that you've exposed yourself to at least 2 opponents when you're already at a madness advantage, when you're also not in the best defendable position. So I would say that's not ideal, and let's see how you deal with the rest of the fight. Alright, so we see you repairing your heals here, and as this Pathfinder grapples up to the high ground, you now have a pretty solid idea of where they're going, so I'd really like you to let your teammate know that as they're contesting the high ground that your teammate is on, so that's important for them to know, as well as for you to know that he's above you and his grapple is off of cooldown. It's just generally useful information which you can use to decide how to play this fight. Then, as you see the Octane, good pre-aiming towards the head, but you pull your aim down for I can't quite tell the reason why. I think that's a small mistake, definitely should fix that. You should be going for pure headshots there, so that if he had better armor, you would have certainly killed him. But either way, now that you've downed him, you're in a 2v2 situation, and I don't like how far you go outside and how much you're looking around to try and figure out where these last enemies are. Then next you decide to go back inside and heal in a corner where most of the doorways are blown out, and they've seen you there a bunch of times before, as well as having killed somebody there, so they definitely know where you are, and it's not an ideal position from either of the 3 ways that they could enter that building. They have a direct line of sight on you, and they have very easy angles to throw grenades at you or sticky you with an arc star, so this is not a great place to heal, as well as being so close to the outside that they can easily hear you from the top. Next you have a Pathfinder with a Devotion chasing you, and you have no armor, yet you decide to take the fight on top of the stairs where they have a better peek than you. And while you take this fight, I also see you stressing out your aim a little bit, where you have shots that you really should be hitting. Now, if we look at this in real time, you get 2 great knocks and it's a pretty clutch situation. But if we go back and look at how this situation unfolded, as well as me having looked at a bunch of your gameplay before and having talked to you a lot, I know what your skill level is. You could have played this a lot better, and I'm going to be a bit harsher here than I would be with other players, just because I know you can do better than this. So let's go back and talk about the things that I would do differently. First of all, you know that your teammate's on high ground and nowhere near helping you, so taking a 2v1 with a Pathfinder that has a Devotion while you don't have armor is just poor judgment no matter how good you are, and you should have kept going on the high ground here further into the building where you had the opportunity to hold a door or bamboozle the enemies before you were able to heal up so that you could take this fight not only with full health but also with your teammate. Secondly, when you decide to hold the glass on top of the staircase, you are in a position where if they are pre-aiming properly, they will have an easier shot than you, and so you really have to stay calm, and the way that you are pre-aiming through the glass, those are shots that you should not miss. If you are missing those shots when you are at your skill level, where you are pre-aimed and able to see the enemies before you turn the corner while they are not strafing, then you know that you need to take a breath, reset the fight and calm down, because you are panicking and you can do better than this. And that also goes to show itself right after when the Wraith comes up the staircase. You end up winning that fight, and you know exactly why, because she missed her Peacekeeper shot and then panicked and turned around and ran away instead of continuing to fight. You won that only because she was pretty bad and messed up, and not because you played that correctly, because you fought inside a tiny building against a Wraith with a Peacekeeper while you had about 20 health. Now while you finish up this fight, the last 2 things that I want to point out about this is that when the Wraith chased you towards the staircase, at the last moment you really should have jumped so that the Peacekeeper could not have hit you before you turned the corner. That would have downed you had you been a better player. And the next thing is that with your aim, you really need to make it a conscious effort from here on out to have higher crosshair placement. Your headshot accuracy and the average height at which you go for torso shots is not quite high enough. With how good your aim is, it would benefit a lot from forcing yourself to aim just a little bit higher every single time, even as you're running around. Look now, as you're moving towards the next location, you're aiming very low onto the ground, which is a very common problem that people have because it gives you more visibility, more FOV, but it also means that you're aiming at the wrong place once you do get into a fight. So when you expect fights, I really want to see you aim a bit higher and go for more headshots when you can. Moving on towards the next fight, you open with an aggressive slide, which is a very nice move if you're being attacked from the side, because it essentially makes you harder to hit. It's like strafing. It can also make people right in front of you miss their shot or panic, so it can be a great way to engage somebody, especially if they're about to peek from cover or from a doorway. However, in this situation you're in kind of like a hallway, and the only cover you have are behind you and towards the right side or the left side staircase, which is not ideal. So in this situation I would say a forward slide is not the right move, and it is a bit ballsy here. I mean, it ends up working out, but it's just a bad way to engage in this situation and something you should look to avoid. Lastly, as you're coming up the staircase, I want to see you turn around way earlier to first be pre-aimed for anybody that might be peeking over the edge of the staircase, and when the doorway becomes visible you should already be aimed towards it, so that you are already aimed there if the Pathfinder shows up a little bit earlier, especially since you just shot, so anybody that is above or coming from the outside of the building should know fairly well where you are, so you need to be a bit more proactive with your pre-aiming of corners. You're doing it right, you're just a little bit too slow, and once again you pre-aimed a bit too low, so I would have liked to see you aim a little bit higher, as well as being a bit uncertain why you ADS once again in close range against a Pathfinder. If you didn't ADS there, you would strafe a little bit faster, which would make you slightly harder to hit. After looting and healing, you move back towards runoff to make your way towards the next zone, but your teammate notices that there's actually an enemy where you came from, and so you make your way back. And the thing I wanted to point out right there is that even though your teammate is already in trouble, potentially 1v3, you still take the time to jump up onto a high ground, a good defendable position where you have a line of sight over your teammate, and I think that that is a gorgeous play. That's exactly what you should be doing, because if you just run in and suicide, you are of no help to your teammate, and by actually playing it right and save, you buy so much more time for them to maybe still stay alive, or at the very least create a situation where you can then play well. So that's very good, as well as from the roof not jumping off too early and realizing you can shoot through almost any crack that you can see through in this game is overall just very good. Now the enemy team wasn't that good anyway and didn't really push you, so there's not too much to point out on this fight, but I just wanted to draw some attention to what I thought was a very clean play, because a lot of us can learn from that. Moving on, that fight was pretty clean, so we're moving on to the last two teams, and you're still in runoff towards low ground. At this point I'd be a little bit more proactive of getting to the middle of the circle, just so I can get some idea of where these last teams are, but while you're in runoff you still manage to see a caustic trap, giving you the information that one of the teams at the very least is probably nearby. So far pretty good. You also got yourself a Kraber, so this is going to be fun. I love the Kraber, and the Kraber is a great weapon if you're at a man disadvantage, because if you play from a safe position, it can allow you to get it down quickly before a fight starts, which means you can start fights with a 2v2 rather than a 2v3 if you take the time to get a good shot off. Now you do the first half of that here, your accuracy is good and you're patient with your shots, so you get great damage, but you don't do the other half of it, which is the positioning. Your decision to go through the tunnel here where you don't have high ground, a questionable escape path, they can flank you or go above quite easily, as well as your attack here just being massively predictable. All that together really kills the value that you're getting out of your Kraber here, and since you have a limited amount of shots with it, that is really a shame. Had you gone above or via the flank on the left where the fence is open, you would have been able to get much more value out of this Kraber play, especially with the shots that you did hit, because they would not have been able to break line of sight so easily, and they wouldn't have all three been looking at you the moment you peek, forcing you to back off and take a bad spot to heal. Next up, your decision to heal next to the tunnel and use a slow medkit when you could be using a syringe in tandem with your heal drone, which is much faster, or two small mistakes that put you at unnecessary risk in an already 2v3 situation. So taking that together with the earlier position, I think if you just took a split second to think a bit more about how you should have engaged here, it would have been a cleaner fight. Now you do play it fairly safe and play well together with your teammate, who does take a high ground flanking position, so you do end up winning the fight, which is very nice, but I think we can all agree at this point that if you had taken a high ground flank yourself here on this team, you only needed to hit one of those two headshots you hit and you would have actually gotten a knock for it and been able to win the fight there quite easily, because that enemy team was not very good and you are much better. Instead you end up losing those kills to your teammate, which is not the worst thing, but at your skill level I certainly would have liked to see you play that more properly, because you could have beaten them quite easily had you not shoved yourself into a bad spot. So let's move on to the next fight. There's only 2 teams left now, and I find that a very important thing to point out, because the way you play a battle royale completely changes once there's only 2 teams left. When you play a battle royale, you have to account for the fact that teams could be anywhere and there can be any amount of teams with any amount of members involved in a single fight. However, as soon as there is only 1 enemy team left, you only need to find them and there are no more surprises or third parties. That means you can be way more open with your positioning, you need far less universal awareness, and you can be more aggressive or more slow depending on what you need. Because of that, I would like to see you engage differently, and we're going to point that out as you start fighting this final team. The first thing I would like to point out is that you're hugging this left side wall, which normally is a great position because you're less likely to be hit from third parties on this right open area, whereas if you took the position that you fought the last team at, you would have been much more likely to be third partied or hit by a random sniper far away. But none of that matters because you know where the only enemies are that are left in the lobby, so take a wider angle here, take a bigger flank, give yourself a more comfortable spot, climb up onto the mountain, anything. Why are you still in this uncomfortable corner when you could give yourself a much better fight? Because of that, you end up having to reset here, and these early Kraber shots didn't get any value, which is a bit of a waste when you're 2v3 with a Kraber. So I would have liked to see you be a bit more proactive on this team here, especially since they seemed hesitant to push. They most likely weren't very good, so you could have definitely punished their poor positioning there and been ready to push up behind them as the zone came moving in. Now you and your teammate ended up resetting the position instead, but you did take a nice little high ground here and you're relatively close together on a defendable spot while the enemies split up, so that's a nice easy knock for you right there. The only thing I would do differently is as soon as you knock him, because he does not instantly turn around with his res shield, is I would finish him with the 301 or the Kraber, just because you can from the spot you're in, even if you take a little damage. The only enemy that could push you before you are able to use a battery all the way up there is the Pathfinder, and he isn't close enough to do that, so you may as well finish the guy that you knocked and then just use a battery, because that way you know that it's going to stay a 2v2 and it's going to be a lot easier to manage those 2 enemies without having to also keep the position of the downed enemy in your mind. And one more thing I would like to point out, which doesn't really end up influencing this fight at all, but it's just a nice little extra thing, is that you have your ultimate available, and at the start of this fight I would have dropped it on the mountainside there. There's very little chance that they will get to it, but if somebody deals a lot of damage to you, you can quickly not only use it for cover, but it might have a purple armor that you can use for a quick armor swap. Right here I wouldn't climb straight into where you think the enemies are. Luckily you reset rather quickly, and this little climb is unfortunate. It happens. I can feel the panic right there. We all know what that feels like. And after this battery, I like that you keep moving because you have an open window right to your left there, and so I would reset as well before using the far slower health heals. You get the finish that you should have gotten before, which is good. This gives you more space to work with, and so far the enemies are doing a great job of splitting themselves up for you. Nice little door usage there. Shame you didn't hold your shot for the headshot, because you could have had it there with how long he peeked. But still, you're getting good value. They're splitting themselves up. Your teammate is a bit far and not very fast. I would play a bit closer above him because he's quite likely to be pushed, but luckily he ends up running towards you anyway, and so that ends up happening. Nice chase on the Wraith here, don't give up on that. And again, right here, just finish her. Right, just like that. Very good. Now it's 2v1, you can take as long as you need. This is a challenge you shouldn't have taken. You are 2v1 and all you need to do is finish this Pathfinder to end up winning the fight. So while you're damaged here, it's an unnecessary risk to take this challenge against him while you are completely out in the open. Just play it safe at this point. There is nothing you could possibly lose. Other than that, very well played. I hope this helps, and I'm very happy to see you've improved. Peace.